Thank you, President Betty, and good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. It's great to be here this afternoon and introduce a colleague of mine in the College of Arts and Sciences, and someone whom I think you are, with whom you're very familiar. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Bonnie Lynn-Sherow. She's an Associate Professor of American History, and she's the Executive Director of the Chapman Center for Rural Studies here at Kansas State University. Dr. Lynn-Sherow graduated from Northwestern University in Illinois and specializes in the environmental history of agriculture on the Great Plains and North American Indians. Her first book, Red Earth, Race and Agriculture in the Oklahoma Territory, won the Oklahoma Historical Society's prize for the best dissertation and was an Oklahoma Notable Book in 2005. She has been director of the Chapman Center ever since 2007. And she and her husband, Jim, have been active for many years in Manhattan as advocates for historic preservation and in the development of the Flint Hills Discovery Center. So with that, Bonnie Lynn-Sherow.
I'm too short.
I'm going to try to help drive this, so. You want me to do this too, or are you good?
Just hit these little buttons,
Yeah.
right? I think I can. Well, welcome. Thank you very much for having me this afternoon. It is a great honor to be here. I want to just note that your president was anticipating my arrival and brought me a wonderful book about a small town in Kansas. So thank you. We're going to add that to our collection in the Chapman Center. I also want to express my appreciation to Dean Dorhout, who I just want to brag on a little bit. I think I have the best dean at K-State.
I think you do.
I think I do too. I've had a lot of deans, and there are different kinds of deans. And there are deans that are great at fundraising, there's deans that are wonderful administration, and what Peter's good for is, well, he's good for a lot of it. What Peter is best at is inspiring faculty. Peter is a faculty dean. He gives us the inspiration, he gives us the support, he gives us the go-ahead, he gives us the attaboy or attagirl, and it's very inspiring to work for you, Dean Peter. Thank you. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Chapman Center for Rural Studies, and I have this little, nice header slide here, Rediscovering, Preserving, and Celebrating the History of Rural Kansas. Okay, wake up. I know, that already sounds boring, but I promise you, it's not going to be boring. So what is the Chapman Center? This is Mark Chapman. He was an alum of Kansas State University, a history and political science alum who returned regularly to Kansas. He lived in Texas, in Cat Spring, Texas, as a matter of fact. He went on to get a law degree at University of Kansas, and then became an investor in energy and was extremely successful at that, and so he became a philanthropist to Kansas State University. You will see his name on many things across the university, but the very first thing that he did when he came to Kansas State University with philanthropy in mind was the day he walked into the Department of History and kind of said, I want to buy an historian. I wish I was making that up, but I'm not. He came in and said, I have a project and I want it done, and there's historians here and I would like to hire an historian. Well, we don't really do that. However, we think we can help you out. And so what he was really interested in, this is a picture of Mark in the high chair. This is his parents in the central image there, and his parents again on their 60th wedding anniversary. What Mark was concerned about was something that was really near and dear to me anyway, and that was the fact that much of our history of rural Kansas was disappearing very quickly. And his parents had grown up in a little town called Broughton, and they had a farm there, and Broughton was condemned for flood control in the 1960s, and all the townspeople had to leave, and many of them moved to Clay Center. But the story of that town, its genesis, its life, it's the people who live there, who worked so hard to make that community a success, it was in danger of slipping away in terms of memory forever. And much of that information was in the minds and hearts of the people who lived there, and they were getting to be extremely elderly. And I said, okay, well, what we can do, I said, we can't, dedicate a faculty member to a project like this. However, let's put a couple of things together. I said, why don't we take this opportunity to do the research that you want to have done, but we'll give it to students to do, and we will train them to be professional historians, and we will give them the guidance to put this together. And that's exactly what we did. And he was so happy with that project. You have the results of that project. 6 tables have the results of that project on their table right now, the history of Broughton, Kansas. I also left some business cards out there, and I have some business cards up here. I want you to go around the table, and whoever's birthday is closest to today, you get the book. If you're at a table without a book, come and get a card and I'll send you the book. Okay? So that's something for you to discuss after my talk. I don't want any part of that organization or competition. So what we have here is a picture of Leisure Hall. When we first started the project, working on Broughton, we were in a tiny office on the 3rd floor of Eisenhower Hall, a windowless office. There was myself, there was a new faculty member, and a graduate student and a couple of undergrads who were interested in doing the project. And that was the whole thing, and 2 desks and no equipment. And we started what's called the Broughton Project. And it went so well, and it was so productive, and Mark was so pleased with it that he said, we need to do this for more people. It can't just be my little town that's in need of this kind of work. We said, well, no, actually, there's a lot of places. And he said, fine, we're going to create a place for you to really get to work. And so he negotiated some space with the dean and with the president of the university, and he renovated an entire wing of this beautiful 1907 building that used to be the veterinary college on campus. And it had not seen a lot of updates over the years. Still hasn't, but at our end of the building, it has. And so what we took over a classroom space, a research room, and some offices. And for 2 years, instead of being a full-time faculty member, I think about 30% of my time was spent with a punch list, with a construction crew, which luckily unfortunately, I have to tell you, for the construction crew, that came as a huge shock when he found out that I understood construction. But we persevered, and anyway, the results were pretty stunning. We ended up with a beautiful classroom, a beautiful research space and offices, and we were very, very pleased with that. And we had an opening in January of 2011. In the picture here, we have Dr. Chucky. Sue Chucky is probably known to many of you, and she was the chair of the department at the time, and Mark and myself and my research director, who's Dr. Morgan, who actually edited the book that's on top of your tables there. And this is one of the crews of the students who didn't get the opportunity to work in the new Chapman Center, who had to work in the tiny office on the 3rd floor of Eisenhower Hall. And some of them might even be familiar to you, because one of the things that's amazing about the Chapman Center is that our students have managed to get jobs, or not even managed, but they've literally just walked into jobs in history across the nation. The young lady on this side, I guess that would be on your left, is the director of a museum in Georgia. The young lady on the far right is the curator of exhibits at the Riley County Historical Society. So, the 3 things that the Chapman Center does today: discovery, preservation, and sharing. Discovery happens every single day in the Chapman Center. We have students in classes that work on these projects. We have students that are paid interns that work on these projects. They're sort of like senior students that help the other students that are newly learning the skills of how to do research in history. This was taken just a week ago, south of Council Grove. It was the house that the agent you lived in for the Kaw Indian Nation. And of course, all of our research starts in the classic way, with books. And our library is filled with wonderful reference books, very specific to the work that we do in the history of rural Kansas. But most of our work, frankly, happens out of the classroom, off the campus, and all over the place. One of the things that we do is we get out. And so you'll notice that this is not a very old photograph. the first thing that we do to orient new classes of students to the work that we do is we take them to Broughton. We show them what we had to work with to begin with. All that's left of that town is this sign. And we show them how to use all of the tools at their disposal, as well as get a sense of what it was like to live in that place, which we feel is really, really, really important for students to understand that these are real people who lived in a real place, and how better to show them that than to take them to that place. And they love doing things like this. It might seem kind of macabre to have students walking around in cemeteries, but in fact they truly enjoy walking the ground of these places, and it may not seem useful to be taking down the names of a person who died in this town. However, having those names and dates plugs us into enormous databases like Ancestry.com and newspapers.com and Census. So we connect that classroom and online learning together with the physical evidence that's left behind. And they have a lot of fun crawling in and out of old ruins of places. And they, in fact, we have a student now considers himself a professional lost town finder. And then we also, when you think about it, that discovery, it's in books, it's in databases, it's in the physical evidence that's left behind. But I can tell you right now, the deepest well of information about the past dwells in the minds of the people who live there. And so what we have here is a picture of myself, obviously, and Pauline Sharp. How many of you know Jim Sharp? Okay, so this is his daughter-in-law. Pauline Sharp is the great-granddaughter of Washunga. Washunga was the last traditional chief of the Kaw Nation as they got removed from Kansas and moved into Oklahoma. In this picture, she, in 2015, May of this year, was the first time that the Kaw danced in Kansas on their own ground in 113 years. And she gave an address about what it meant to her to be a member of that community and to return to Kansas and to return to the site that she actually called him Wash. I guess that's what everybody called him, where Wash was the chief. And she couldn't finish the speech. She started crying, and I took over and read the rest of it for her. And then we had a good time. We went around and looked at all the other things at Alagaweho Park. If you haven't been out there, the Kaw have reestablished themselves in Kansas, and we're going to do some research on the history of the village that was there. And this is my class out there at Alagaweho Park with Pauline. And you'll notice the young man is sitting in the front row there with his two little boys on his knees. One of the other interesting things about the Chapman Center is we're very community-oriented. When we go on our trips and our research forays, I say, bring your mom, bring your kids, bring anybody you want. We're gonna do this all together. We're gonna learn this together, and that's really opened up a lot of students' hearts, I think, in terms of seeing this as more bigger than themselves and bigger than a classroom experience. So that's discovery. Discovery in books, discovery in databases, discovery in the places, and discovery in people's hearts and minds. Then we have to preserve it. And to preserve that history takes a number of different forms. And what I have here is a picture of Melvin Brunzel, who has the walking stick. Next to him is Alan Winkler, and the gentleman on the right-hand side of the screen is Greg Hoots. These gentlemen are just a few of the representatives of the people that we work with on a daily basis in the Chapman Center. Greg is the curator of photographs of the Wabunsee County Historical Society. Melvin Brunzel worked for 11 years after retirement in the Kansas State Historical Society, collecting information on every single place name in the history of Kansas. There are right now 660 places on a map, but there were 9,000 place names. That is a loss of 8,400 places that used to exist in Kansas. Now that's job security, I'll tell you. I'm never gonna run out of places to do research on. And Alan Winkler is, so we gave him a prize. We created a prize for him, for Mr. Brunzel, and Alan Winkler won that prize a year later, and that's why the photo was taken. And Greg is a self-trained historian and author, has thousands and thousands of historic photographs, and we were in a the midst of a very, very large digitization project with him, where we are digitizing literally thousands of glass plate negatives that without our help would absolutely disintegrate and no one would be able to see into the future. These are just some examples of the kind of photos that we find. You're not going to find these on Kansas Memory or on, on archives.com or, photos.com or Google Images. These are things that are hidden. So much of it. If you think about history from my point of view, it sort of looks like a triangle. And that little point at the top is what you can find on Google. Okay? And then it just gets bigger and bigger as you find more and more things in libraries and then small historical societies. And then when you get right down to it, in people's living rooms and closets and in their storage areas and in their attic and in their memories. So it just gets bigger and bigger the deeper and deeper you drill down. And so one of the things my students really learn is that, they can use Google for good. That happens to be my watchword. Use Google for good. But you have to get farther than that. You've got to dig down deeper. This is what makes a real historian. So one of the things we also do to preserve things, besides digitizing huge collections, which we're in the process of digitizing 3 massive collections right now, is we have to take our own images. Time is passing. We need to be able to document the past as it stands right now. We'll be glad in 20 years that we did this. And so we actively collect photographs across Kansas and across the region. This is a picture of Tom Parrish. Maybe some of you know Tom Parrish. He has a book out called Take Shelter. He has photographed hundreds of underground shelters across Kansas and has had, he's been and given you a talk here. So Tom Parrish is now my faculty member. I grabbed him, and he's just been amazing. And we have a group of people behind him there that he is training in the same exercise of finding places and documenting them for the future. And he's helping us digitize a lot of material in the Chapman Center. And here's another one of his workshop participants learning how to document the history of rural Kansas through photography. A couple of other things that we do to help preserve the history of Kansas is, like I mentioned, we have all these external partners. One of the places that we have a partnership with is Pioneer Bluffs, which is near Matfield Green in South Central Kansas, or I guess the Central Kansas. They've just undergone a massive restoration of their barn. They have a beautiful 12-acre site of a working ranch, and they had an issue. They don't have very many volunteers that can be there all the time. It's a shoestring kind of operation, and they were in dire need of a walking tour. They said, we would love to have it so that people could come and open a little box, like you do out at the Kanza trailhead, and take out your little map and walk around if there's nobody here. And she says, we just have no one here who knows how to do graphics or how to do that history or to create this kind of thing. I said, my students can do that. And she said, are you sure? How? She says, like in a year or so? And I'm like, no. I said, 3 weeks. She just about fell off the bench we were sitting on, and we did. We had it done in 3 weeks, and we had it printed and in her hands. So that was in March, and by May 1st, we had it printed and in her hands at Pioneer Bluffs in time for her busy season for people coming by. And I just had to show you this little photo on the other end of this little boy. The Maud Rogler was the owner of the Rogler Ranch, and this was her nephew, and his name is Pat Sobel, and Pat Sobel is 94 years old. And this photo was taken when he was 4. And at the bottom, I wish you could see, this is one of these photos that, you're so glad you found it. He's wearing his own father's hat, he's wearing his father's boots, and he's got a gun, obviously. And it says at the bottom of the photo in handwriting, it said, yes, the gun is real. And I just laughed my head off. I said, Pat, we got to save this photo. So other ways in which our students help preserve the past. This past Saturday, I took a group of 20 students to Maple City. Anybody know where Maple City is? Awesome, good. So it's right near Dexter. Dexter? Okay, we got one person. One newspaper man man over in the corner here. An attorney over here knows where it is. But Dexter was the first place to discover helium as a natural element, believe it or not. But anyway, Maple City was a tiny community near Dexter. It doesn't, sleepy little place, but their little community has taken care of their little 2-room schoolhouse for 100 years, all by themselves. A couple of trustees, maybe 2 families, maybe 8 people over time have been taking care of this little schoolhouse. Beautifully restored, beautifully kept on the outside. Grass is cut. You go inside, it is a mess. I guess men aren't very good at cleaning inside. But in any case, it literally closed in 1965, and it looks like somebody walked out the front door and closed it and locked it and never went back. Unbelievable. The desks are there, and the George Washington and Lincoln are hanging on the wall, and the books are there. 5 minutes, good. And so I took my students down there. It was 3 hours down, 3 hours of mad, crazy cleaning the place and putting dust jackets on the books and doing as much work as we can, and then 3 hours back, and then I just hit the hay. I'm telling you, that was one of the longer field trips that I've done. But the kids got so much out of feeling like they were preserving history. So, celebrating and sharing. We do this a lot. A lot of our students have gone on to be award-winning researchers. Every single year that the Undergraduate Research Symposium has been held in Topeka, one of our students has been there. This other little group of students was giving presentations all over the state the year that they were there at the Chapman Center. And obviously, one of the other things that we do is I give a lot of talks. So my research assistant, she threw that picture in there. But we have a fantastically active web page. This is our web page. You can see that we will see that at the end. It also has a Facebook page and a Twitter page. We are on top of it. We just don't do Instagram. I'm really, really sorry about that. I'm just against Instagram. But you'll notice that there's a little tab on there that says Lost Kansas Communities. And this is the heart and soul of what the Chapman does in terms of sharing our information. We have 153 projects that are published on a digital archive that you can reach through our webpage. If you are in China and you put in Bala, Kansas, our page comes up. We have, I'm serious, so we have 153 communities. We have 40 more that are ready to go up. We put up an average of 25 to 30 new studies every single year. These are not all the studies that our students do. These are only the best ones. So you have to get an A in our class in order to be able to have your piece published. And students work extremely hard, and it's an incredibly great incentive for them to work hard on their final papers. And obviously we're sort of being able to break through the the glass ceiling of visibility. You may have noticed that a couple weeks ago in Manhattan Mercury, there was a piece about the Chapman Center. One of my students was quoted, and I about talking about lost communities, and that's what's on the right-hand side of the page here. And of course, we're a scholarly center, so we publish books. We publish lots of things, and this is just a small sample of books that we have published and are available through the Chapman Center. And we have another book called Middle Kansas that'll be coming out next year. And the next to last slide, am I good for time? Awesome. So our next big push, and we've been working on this for more than a year, is we're going to be opening an exhibit in the Flint Hills Discovery Center in September of 2016. It's going to feature 12 of the little communities that we have researched, and I can't tell you what they are. Do not ask me. It is a surprise. I've already been accosted by several people. What communities are you going to include? And I can't tell you that, but it's going to be essentially an exhibit in which I want every single person who walks through the door to feel that that exhibit reflects their experience. Every one of us has had a home. Every one of us can remember our grandparents' home or some other rural community that we are connected to. And we remember those early childhood toys, or that old car that our parents had, or the smell of that wood stove. We want that exhibit to really, really grab you in terms of those memories, because the central feature of this exhibit is telling your story. We're going to have a little booth in which you go in and you can record your own story for us, and you're going to be able to share that story in the same way that we share the stories of other communities across the country. We're going to have StoryCorps. NPR StoryCorps come in November, and they're going to help facilitate that process, and then all of those stories will be located and preserved then in the Library of Congress. I'm really looking forward to this, and I hope to see many, many of you come to that. When we first started the Chapman Center, it was me, Dr. Morgan, MJ, and a graduate student and 2 undergrads. There was 5 of us. Today, this is my crew. There are 18. We needed more space. Actually, you know that space migration project? We're already on top of that. We need more space, and we've already asked for 2 or 3 additional offices for our work. But now it takes this many people to do all the things that we do and to train all of the hundreds of students that come through our classes who are part of this larger project of documenting the rural past. And here are the web pages, you know, the sites that you can go to learn more about the Chapman Center. Isn't that a beautiful photograph? That's Volland Store. We also have a project with Volland, and we're going to be having our retreat out there in a couple weeks. And so there's just so many wonderful things about rural Kansas, little hidden gems of information and stories. Ask me about the story of the flying coffin someday. And so go to those sites and learn more about the Chapman Center. And thank you very, very much for having me today.
Are there any questions? Yes.
Does the funding come primarily from Mr. Chapman?
That's a good question. I've had a number of grants. I've had an NEH grant. I had a commercial grant from Brunswick Corporation, a CECD grant. I've written many funding grants. Mr. Chapman put together a package that provided us base funding for a number of years, and unfortunately, Mr. Chapman died in April of 2014, and he provided funding for the Chapman Center for a while with that. Yes, sir.
Are any of the lost communities deteriorating to the point where you require archaeologists to...
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're working on a place right now called Whiskey Point, and all that's left there are things that archaeologists have found. Unfortunately, stuff like whiskey bottles, perfume bottles, and other things that that'll maintain themselves over time. A Whiskey Point was basically a rowdy place next to Fort Riley where soldiers could go to drink. And there was a few houses there, and it tried to become a community until some captain in the army over there decided that the guys didn't look too good on Monday morning muster, and he broke it down. So that's one of our communities that we researched. It only lasted for 5 years. Yes, sir.
Do you investigate towns that are still alive and still growing?
That is such a good question. I get that question. It's an excellent question. You do have to meet some criteria to get on our list, and it's kind of a point form, like how many points you get. If you have less than 150 people is usually we have to have less than the population. If you don't have a post office, if you don't have a working school, you don't have a working grocery store, then you're definitely a candidate for us to do research on. So yes, a lot of these communities still have a few people living in them, and maybe even 90 people in them, but they no longer function as a town. They no longer have any services that you can really call it a functional place in that way anymore.
Bonnie, thank you very much.